I now would like to really provide a tribute to our outgoing chair. Our outgoing chair is somebody that we've really come to know and respect and love, both through his words and deeds. In particular, through his stewardship of the National Governors Association, where he took on a what we might call a different kind of initiative, right? In the past, we've had initiatives, infrastructure, or mental health, and those have been very meaningful initiatives. The history goes way back. I reviewed the last 20 when I was coming up with my own. But Governor Cox really broke the mold and said what we need is not so much progress on an issue. I'm sure he's for that too. But what we really need is this kind of moral progress as a nation and about how we can disagree better, the way that governors can play a constructive role in helping to heal this national spirit, learning how to engage in meaningful conversations and disagreements with one another again. Through his leadership, NGA has championed respect, civility, civic engagement in our states across the nation. The Disagree Better initiative, of course, is even more important today than when we began this work. And I know it will live on as well. And Governor Cox will discuss the way and manner that work will continue moving forward. With that, I want to turn it over to our incoming Vice Chair. I'm sorry, I'm supposed to turn over to Governor Cox. I'm going to turn it over to the outgoing chair, Governor Cox. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Polis, for those very kind words. Ladies and gentlemen, this has just been a surreal day, a couple days for us. We appreciate all our friends from Utah who are able to join us for these two sessions. Thank you for your kindness and generosity, and I want to thank the incredible governors for their patience with me as we've been together over this past year. I have an opportunity to just share a few words as I wrap up, and then I want to pay tribute to a few of our governors, and then I'll officially pass the gavel over to my incredible Vice Chair, Governor Polis. So I was thinking about what I might share with you a little bit today about this journey we've been on, and I want to, if you'll permit me just a moment to share a quick story. When I was a kid, I went to work for my uncle, and he had a construction company, and we were doing some work, and one day he gave me an opportunity. He said, hey, we need to go, we've been hired to tear down a barn in Fairview, the small town in central Utah where I grew up. And he said, you and a couple others will go down and take care of tearing this building down. It was an old barn, falling apart, and I was so excited. Look, there's fun, and then there's getting in a backhoe and knocking a building down fun. It was such an adrenaline rush. I just have to tell you, those walls are knocking down, and it didn't take us long. I mean, in a matter of just a few minutes, it was just a pile of rubble. Tearing things down is really easy. The dopamine hits. It is so much fun, and it turned out I was pretty good at it. Obviously, there's a little metaphor in here. I feel like in our country today, we've gotten really, really good at tearing things down, and people down, and institutions down, and parties down. And building is hard. Not when I was 16, but many years later, I thought about that building and that barn, and I thought about the people who built it. We live in a very poor part of the state, a very poor part of this country. I can only imagine how long it took for them to earn the money necessary and gather the supplies, probably years to build this barn. I can only imagine how many people came together to put up that structure as they built community together. I know whoever built that barn did not do it alone. And again, in our society today, building is hard. Building institutions is hard work. Tearing them down is easy. Building up our neighbors and our communities is hard work. And you know that. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. But being a governor is hard work because you are the builders. That's what you've been hired to do. The pundits can tear down. The arsonists can tear down. The conflict entrepreneurs that are all around us, some of us in our business and in the media and elsewhere, they're really good at tearing down. But we need some architects. We need more builders, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. I want to conclude with I just want to conclude with some words by a friend who many of you know, an incredible writer. You need to read his new book. It's called American Covenant. Yuval Levin said this. He was asked a question recently, and I've heard him. He's been asked this before, and I was really excited for the answer. He was asked by a student, "Are you optimistic about our country?" Now, the thing you have to know about Yuval is he hates the word optimism. Now, that may surprise you. It seems like a pretty good word, but I wrote down his answer, and I want to read it because he expressed it so much better than I could. He said, "I think optimism and pessimism are more alike than they may seem. They're both basically arguments for passivity. They're ways of thinking about what's just going to happen inevitably. So I'm not an optimist. I certainly don't think good things are just going to happen. That seems like a crazy way to react to all of human history." Then he says this, "But I am hopeful. And I think hope is the virtue that sits between the vices of optimism and pessimism. And it's the view that things could be better if we are willing to make them so." So, ladies and gentlemen, I am not optimistic about our country. And I don't think any of us should be. I think it's crazy to think our country is just going to get better. I often say that pendulums swing, and Americans always do the right thing after we've tried everything else, right? We've heard that quote many times. But that's crazy talk. There is nothing that says that we are inevitably going to get better as a country. There is nothing that says that we aren't going to continue to tear ourselves apart. There is nothing that says that we won't inevitably have another civil war. It's happened before, and it can happen again. And it will happen again if we don't do the work. But I am hopeful. I'm very hopeful about our country. I'm hopeful because I get to serve with you. I'm hopeful because there are good people in this country that are willing to make it so. I'm hopeful because the people in this room are not willing to let this happen to us. We can make this a better place. We can't hate each other. We can't hate each other. We do hate each other. We can love each other again. We can disagree without hating each other. We can have passionate debates, and we do, over whose ski resorts are better. The greatest snow on earth is in Utah. And we can fight about immigration and abortion, but at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, we are Americans, and America is still the greatest country on the face of the earth. I'm proud to be an American, and I'm hopeful for this country. Thank you. Thank you. Sit down. You're good. Thank you. Thank you. I thank you. No, please, thank you. I said the last thing. I promise this is the last thing. This institution of the National Governors Association, please don't tear it down. It's worth saving. It's one of the last organizations on earth in this country that brings people of both parties together to actually get stuff done. And we need that more than ever. Look, I know it's hard. I know it's hard to go to all the meetings. We could just go to meetings all the time somewhere else. We have NGA, we have WGA, we have RGA, we have DGA, we have all of these things, and there's always a reason to make an excuse for the other things. But I'm just telling you, we need you. I know you guys are here, but there's a lot of us that aren't here. Thank you for being here. Please, 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 and I know under the leadership of Jared Polis, we will be strong, but please help me convince our colleagues how important this is. Now, this time we need to recognize some of our governors who will be leaving office this year at the conclusion of their current term. Each of these governors has been an incredible leader to their respective states and territories, and we wish them the very best in their future endeavors. First, we would like to recognize Delaware Governor John Carney, who is here with us today. A lifelong Delawarean, John has been working for the people of Delaware for over 30 years. From 2 terms as lieutenant governor to 3 terms as Delaware's lone member of the U.S. House of Representatives in Congress to 2 terms of governor. As governor, John has focused throughout his career on making Delaware's economy more competitive, preparing Delaware's children to succeed, and building long-term sustainable financial plans for the state of Delaware. Together with his amazing wife, Tracy, who has worked closely with the NGA on her initiative, First Chance Delaware, John has made tremendous progress on each of these priorities. As a member of the NGA's Economic Development and Revitalization Task Force and a member of the federally appointed Council of Governors, John has worked hand in hand with the governors on a bipartisan basis to advocate for states and territories at the federal level and to develop bipartisan policy solutions on numerous issues. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Carney is one of the good guys. We love him, and we wish him the very best. Another round of applause for Governor Carney. Now, there are a few other governors who couldn't be with us. I just want to recognize them. We appreciate the leadership of Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb, who currently serves on the Executive Committee, Missouri Governor Michael Parson, who has served as a member of the NGA's Education, Workforce, and Community Investment Task Force, New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, who has served as a member of the NGA's Executive Committee, as well as the Public Health and Disaster Response Task Force, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, who served as NGA's Executive Committee and Economic Development and Revitalization Task Force, and North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, who has served as a member of the Executive Committee and currently serves on NGA's Economic Development and Revitalization Task Force as well, and Puerto Rico Governor Pedro Pierluisi, a member of NGA's Economic Development and Revitalization Task Force, as well as Washington Governor Jay Inslee and West Virginia Governor Jim Justice. We appreciate them and their families for their service to our states. So it's like we're going to have a big crop of new governors for Baby Governor School, which we're all very excited about, happening in Colorado. So we're looking forward to that. And with that, it's time to recognize NGA's 2024 and 2025 leadership. It's my privilege to confirm the members' vote to elect Colorado Governor Jared Polis as the 2024 and 2025 chair, and Oklahoma Governor, yes, as well as Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt as vice chair. Let's give him a hand as well. I'm also pleased to announce the following governors to serve as members of the Executive Committee, where I will also remain in the role as the previous NGA chair. The 2024-2025 Executive Committee members are Montana Governor Greg Gianforte, New Mexican Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, New York Governor Kathy Hochul, Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, and Tennessee Governor Bill Lee. Congratulations to all of you, and thank you for your leadership. Now, this job is much more fun when you have an amazing vice chair and first spouse. Governor Polis and Marlin have been incredibly supportive of Abby and I. They're dear friends. We're lucky to have this organization in such capable hands. And so I officially award the gavel of the chairmanship of the NGA to the new chair, Governor Jared Polis.
Thank you. Thank you, Spencer. I told our kids it's the hammer of Thor and it has great power. I hope that's true. I want to introduce our next vice chair from the great state of Oklahoma. By the way, it's entirely a coincidence that we have bordering states, Utah, Colorado, Oklahoma, that are passing the gavel. We assume that it will travel elsewhere in the future. But in addition to the great work of Governor Cox, it's been wonderful to get to know our neighboring governor, who gives Governor Youngkin a run for his money as the tallest governor from the state of Oklahoma. It's my honor to introduce your next vice chair, Governor Kevin Stitt.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Man, I'm so honored to serve as the vice chair under your leadership, Governor Polis, and just one more round of applause for Governor Cox. You have been amazing. And the Disagree Better initiative that he started, we want to continue that. I think it's so important, a conversation that all of us need to have and keep close to our hearts. And we are, Bill McBride, we're so thankful for you, your staff. These events don't just happen, and just the lineup that you've set up for us. We still have the King of Jordan coming, and getting Zelensky here is just amazing. So thank you so much for that. And then Matthew McConaughey. I mean, is that guy the coolest guy in the world or what? So thanks for being here. We appreciate you. But to all the governors that participate, I mean, really it's the governors that can move the needle and make things happen. And you're seeing that. You know, I just always tell people that, you know, as governors, we have a unique ability to just get things done in our states. And we can't just sit there and play politics. And I tell people that as governors, we all really want the same thing. And that's the best education for our citizens, the best opportunities for the next generation. We want the best health care and opportunities for our citizens. We want the best roads and bridges. And then in Oklahoma, and I'm sure it is like this in other states, we want the very best economy. And I want Oklahoma to be the most business-friendly state in the country. So that's our goals. And we're moving the needle and making it happen. So, so excited to serve as your vice chair, support the initiative that we're about to hear about here from Governor Polis. And again, thank you so much, and God bless you.
Thank you, Kevin. Congratulations. Thank you, Governor Stitt, for all that you do. A number of you have asked me, what is the initiative we're going to roll out? And first of all, I want to, and I've assured Governor Cox of this, we want NGA to continue to be a partner in the Disagree Better work. It's important for our country. It's important for the governors. That needs to be a permanent part of the work we do. And thank you for the progress the next year with much more to come. So thank you again, Governor Cox. Now, I'm excited to kick off our chair initiative with this following video.
I'm Jared Polis, incoming chair of the National Governors Association. Governors have always played a key role in education. It's one of the biggest items in all of our state budgets. And we want to make sure, with the resources that we invest, that we're getting the very best outcomes possible for individual learners as well as for our economy at large. We know we face a lot of challenges. The nation's report card in education showed a trend of declines in reading and math across the country. Many public schools have seen a rise in absenteeism, widening opportunity gaps, and a big gap between the jobs that are open and the skills that people have. Governors have always been disruptors and leaders, driving innovation in education. And today, students and our economy depend on us more than ever before. That's why I'm so excited to work with my fellow governors to spark a new national conversation, to identify innovative ways to better measure outcomes and redesign and strengthen our education system. That includes increasing coordination across early childhood, K-12 and career readiness, post-secondary and workforce, to ensure that students and the American economy succeed. Today, with NGA, I'm launching the Let's Get Ready, Educating All Americans for Success initiative. The Let's Get Ready initiative will tackle how we're making sure that we're looking at outcomes in a way that aligns with student success and American success and drives positive change for better results. We want to better learn what factors do and don't drive better outcomes. A year from today, Based on the learning from this initiative, we'll release a roadmap that'll support governors and states to drive innovation, bolster our capacity to measure what works and what doesn't, and most importantly, prepare our students and our states for successful futures.
Let's get ready. So, as governors, we have a unique opportunity to lead the way towards preparing every student for success. And that means, of course, success at the individual level for the student, for learners from all backgrounds, and that means success for our economy, powering the private sector with the workforce of today and tomorrow. As our economies continue to grow and evolve, so do the skills that we need to fill in-demand jobs. And we need to figure out how to do a better way, measuring what works and making sure that the outcomes that are produced are the outcomes we need to power an individual successful future and power our economy. We know that for all of us as governors, education is the biggest part of our state budget. It's 25%, 35%. It's one of the biggest things that we invest in, rightfully so. And we know that we need to get more out of that investment, more that leads our state to prosperity, and more that breaks down those barriers that exist to student achievement, breaks the cycle of poverty, and enables opportunity for every American family. We know that education is truly the driving force behind individual opportunity and national competitiveness. And it's time for America to get ready, educate all Americans for success, with governors playing a key role in better measuring outcomes for what we need to see, sharing the practices that work, and of course, having the courage to change what doesn't work to ensure better outcomes for all learners. We know that education and workforce systems are interconnected. In fact, in some ways, this initiative was teased by Ben Sass yesterday and by Matthew McConaughey today about the need to make sure that students are able to succeed in today's and tomorrow's economy. We need to streamline and de-silo education, make sure that students have the skills they have to thrive. Over the next year, we'll explore how we as states best measure what skills and knowledge lead to success, identify best practices that help students achieve those outcomes to meet their goals and our economy's goals over their educational journey, and of course provide governors with a toolbox to invest in and scale what we know works and to change what doesn't work. We're leading with innovation and inquiry and asking questions rather than proposing solutions. Questions like, what outcomes come from the skills and practices that learners need to know at every step of their educational journeys to achieve success in life and make our nation more competitive? How are we measuring outcomes to ensure that education systems are effectively delivering for individual students and for our economy? And then, of course, how can we align resources and policies? We mentioned governors as disruptors and practices to do more of what works to achieve better outcomes for students and for families, and to hold ourselves accountable for achieving success. At the foundation of this initiative is the understanding that education is the launchpad to success for individuals, for communities, for our economy, and for our future. With Let's Get Ready, we're shifting the focus from the inputs, initiatives that are underway, we're all very proud of what's going on in our states, to measuring and scaling what works and sharing best practices. We want to look at whether and how the many different initiatives we hear about are driving or are not driving lifelong success for learners. There's so many examples of innovation. For example, in Rhode Island, partnerships among district leaders, educators, curriculum experts in helping to increase achievement through evidence-based curriculum. In Delaware, where K-3 students receive one-on-one tutoring from AmeriCorps members during the school day. In Virginia, where efforts to streamline workforce development efforts under one agency are cutting red tape and better connecting job seekers to in-demand jobs. With Let's Get Ready, we want to connect the dots between looking at outcomes for all of these and many more promising practices across our country. Outcomes like job placement, earning, time in school. Each of these initiatives is a tool. We'll be hearing shortly from Secretary Katie Jenner of Indiana, who'll talk about how they're building a system in Indiana to truly measure student outcomes, to hold themselves better accountable for every dollar that the state spends on education. Over the next year, we're going to dive deep in these efforts. So when you hear discussion of this initiative, it's not just a broad initiative that says education. It's really about how we can enable individual opportunity and make America more competitive. How do we align what we're doing, and from the state side, the investments we're making in education, to the outcomes that we know that we need more of, both at the individual level and at the state level and national level. And in doing so, we'll provide governors with a playbook to implement these findings in our states to best prepare young people for today's and tomorrow's economy. We need to look at what works, from birth to 12 plus, the grade 12 to career transition, and we need to change what isn't working in best preparing America's students for prosperous futures. To kick off the conversation, we are joined by two trailblazing education thought leaders, Dr. Katie Jenner and Dr. John King. Please join us. Dr. King is currently Chancellor of the State University of New York, or SUNY as it's called, the largest comprehensive system of public education in the higher United States. But just as importantly as a thought leader, he has been in many different sectors and areas. He was, of course, where I first got to know him, Secretary of Education during the Obama administration. Before that, he was New York's Education Commissioner, overseeing everything from elementary and secondary schools to licensure and libraries, museums, and many others. Thank you for joining us, Chancellor King, and sharing your expertise and thought leadership. Next is Dr. Katie Jenner. Katie was appointed as Indiana's very first Secretary of Education in 2021 by our good colleague, Governor Holcomb. Before that, she served as a senior education advisor under Governor Holcomb, beginning her career in education and career and technical in Kentucky. Indiana recently launched the Indiana Graduates Prepared to Succeed dashboard, which helps measure post-graduation outcomes, like some of the things we're talking about today: income, employment. It's poised to become one of the first states to significantly redesign how the high school diploma aligns with success. One of the things, of course, that we find in education, we look at, of course, achievement in math and reading. They're important, but just because you know math and read doesn't mean you're well prepared for a job in the future. Likewise, just because you have a diploma doesn't mean you have the skills you need to succeed. So how do we better align those? Thank you, Dr. Katie Jenner, for joining us.
Thank you.
So we're going to have a conversation, and we will be, of course, welcoming our governor's input and participation in this as well. I'll start off with Katie. You've been thinking deeply about this question of what does success look like, right? And I hope you've been looking at it, and I know you have, at both the individual level and then the economic competitiveness level. One obviously feeds into another, and how we measure it. Can you tell us what the Indiana GPS model is, what insights you've gained by designing it alongside educators, business leaders, and parents, but also in your ideal world, what would it be, and what was that process like to get there, and how can you make it even better in the future?
Well, thank you, Governor Polis, for the opportunity to be here. And also a huge shout out to my governor, Governor Eric Holcomb. He said to tell you hello. None of what I'm about to talk about would have been possible without him linking arms with me and our team, and being such a champion and ally. The Indiana GPS was launched, or that work was launched about 3 years ago when we started as a team. And we started with the question of what really matters to Hoosiers. And Hoosiers is just another name. That's what we call ourselves in Indiana. So what really matters for Hoosiers? And we came up with a profile of a graduate, which a lot of states have. But sometimes profiles of a graduate are just to put on the wall or to put on a website. And in Indiana, we really asked the question of, if this really matters to Hoosiers, not only academic mastery and reading and STEM, but also skills like communication and collaboration, work ethic, financial literacy, civic literacy. If those really matter to our state. Let's acknowledge what we know how to measure, and let's figure out what we don't know how to measure. Because in order to move the needle, you have to know where you're starting. So we've very openly, with our public, a lot of involvement with stakeholders. We affirmed our profile of a graduate as a state, and then we launched IndianaGPS.com. We talked to parents and families who said, we don't understand all the education charts that you all use. Can you make it easier for us? So you'll see a lot of infographics on ours, but you'll also see where you can get into the advanced level. But I think one of the important things that you've talked about, Governor Polis, is the incredible importance for us as a country to not look at education as a linear path, but to really think about how we might blur the lines. So the Indiana GPS includes data from not only the Department of Education, but also the Commission for Higher Education, Department of Workforce Development. So we know, and you can all look right now, of the over 2,200 schools we have in Indiana, we know what that graduating class median income is. We know, and it's all public, a year after high school graduation, what percentage are employed and enrolled? Now, we don't know enlistment data. We need that from the federal government to kind of close that loop.
And then figuring out how to track that success back to the practices. What
right.
was their courses they took? How were their teachers trained?
Absolutely.
All of those things.
Yes. And we've been studying a lot in terms of the return on investment of some of our programs. We've shut some programs down. We've lifted some up. But it's all focused on what matters most to Hoosiers, and let's move the needle in those spaces.
Dr. John King, accountability for existing measures, for innovative measures can be tricky. And you saw that as Commissioner of New York. New York's one of the few states with a exit exam that all the high schoolers had to take to graduate. As Secretary of Ed, you had to balance meaningful accountability with a little thing called politics. That means with local leadership, with context. I think for our perspective as governors, with political capital, right? What are the fights worth fighting? What are the fights that are not worth fighting in this area? What lessons do you have for governors about the best way to meaningfully deploy our political capital to make sure that students have the skills they need to succeed for their own success and for our economy?
Thanks for the question, and thanks, Governor Polis, for the opportunity to be a part of this conversation, and really appreciate the partnership I have at SUNY with Governor Hochul in New York. Look, I think one of the key issues is making sure that the initiatives that sound good actually are good. And so one of our challenges in this moment is we have these very appealing, large-scale initiatives, dual enrollment, career and technical education, that we promise the public are going to translate into students better prepared for great jobs. But we're actually not sure that's happening. And so a lot of the work we need to do, I think, is around data quality and making sure that we actually can track the outcomes for students once they have those experiences. I'll give you an example. Lots of students are doing dual enrollment. Sometimes those dual enrollment classes are really good. Sometimes they're really mediocre. Sometimes they're tied to what a student might do after graduation. Sometimes they're not. We have a program in New York, I know you have it in Colorado as well, called PTech, which is a partnership between IBM, a public university, and the local K-12 system. And in the PTech school, students graduate with an associate's degree, a high school diploma, and first in line for a job at the employer partner. Everyone understands at the outset what the goal is, what good looks like. That is very different from just saying we're going to do a bunch more dual enrollment. Similarly, career and tech ed. There are some amazing career and technical education programs preparing young people for jobs in aviation, in the semiconductor industry, in healthcare. There are also some career and technical education programs that are preparing students for jobs that used to exist 30, 40 years ago and don't really exist anymore. And again, we have not built good systems as a country for tracking the outcomes of those CTE programs and looking 1 year out, 2 years out, 5 years out. Are students getting jobs that provide a family-sustaining wage? So I think one of the core ways that governors can lead is on data and on real accountability for making sure the initiatives deliver for kids and families.
I think in most states, certainly ours, and in many school districts, we know that this sort of claim that a diploma somehow means your career in college ready just isn't true, because kids with diplomas fail in college, kids with diplomas can't get jobs. So it doesn't mean that, and maybe it shouldn't. The diploma itself might not need to mean that. It means you've completed the curriculum necessary for high school. But how do we look at the outcomes beyond the diploma at that high school level where, okay, you're graduating 12th grade, how do we know that if you're going to a college, you are college ready? If you're going into the workforce, that you have a skill that allows you to have a good job? And what should we be looking at as those indicators so we make sure that we're including all learners in this?
Yeah, so one thing I think we have to be very real about in our country is we need to disrupt higher education. That's not in my specific lane. My specific lane is K-12. So when we think about disruption of K-12, which we also must do, if we keep doing the same thing, we're not going to move the needle. So we're rethinking high school. To pull a thread that you just mentioned, we have so much college credit being earned throughout our country with students. Some of the college credit is transferring, some of it's not. But the reality when we look at our data and around the country, we have thousands of students in Indiana alone who are with 1 to 3 courses of completing a credential of value, so educational attainment, while in high school, which then allows for stackable credential potential if they go on to higher ed, or for our business leaders, they find great value because the student has the technical certificate in information technology and is ready to go work for Salesforce or Cummins or whomever. So we have to really break down the barriers, but I would add that it's data for sure, making sure our outcomes are there, but it's also an urgent willingness to disrupt and to just acknowledge we have a lot of work to do in the rethinking high school space, which I think is in many cases the easiest place to start. Mm-hmm. But then our disruption in the high school space is really putting pressure on our higher ed and then our middle school and down. So that's how we're really attacking that.
Katie and I are both high school teachers, and I think one of the things that's a challenge for high school teachers is you really don't get feedback on what happens to your students after they leave. If you go on most school districts' website, they tell you what percentage of the students who graduated said they were going to college. And that percentage, I guarantee you, is significantly higher than the percentage who actually showed up in September, and significantly lower, or that number is significantly higher than the percentage who actually graduated from college. So we just don't know. Kids say it in June or May, yes, I'm going to college, and then we sort of count on that. It'd be very helpful to have more of a feedback loop, to know for the students who start college, are they being placed in a remedial class? If they are, that has implications for what we did in the high school. We should know, our students who got to college, are they staying from year 1 to year 2? Because that has implications for whether we prepare them, not just with academic skills, but the personal organization skills, the persistence, the critical thinking that they're going to need to thrive in college. We also would benefit in high schools from knowing the same for careers. Are students actually getting a job? Are they staying in that job? What its employers experience? So building those sorts of relationships, even with career tech ed, making sure that the employers are at the table in the design of the program and have the opportunity to say, hey, the students who came to us, these are where they came in really strong, and these are the areas where they came in really far behind. I'll give you one piece of very low-hanging fruit. One thing you definitely need when you leave high school, if you are a low-income student, is you need to have completed the free application for federal student aid.
Yes.
We all know that was a uniquely difficult process this year because of delays at the federal level, but so important that students know the money that's available to them. At SUNY, 52% of our students go tuition-free because of federal and state aid. We want students to know. So Governor Hochul just led on an initiative where starting next year, FAFSA completion will be universal for New York.
We've tried, John. We haven't succeeded yet. We've been trying for a couple of years to make that a graduation requirement. We have a similar CAFSA for non-citizens that they can fill it out too, but we would love to do that, with waivers of conscience and all those sorts of things, but we'd like to make that the default so at least people understand that. And likely, I think we'd like to see more federal flexibility and see how we can, align federal student aid to outcomes, both in conventional higher ed and outside conventional higher ed. A little competition for you, I'm sure, but still very important if we care about student outcomes. Let's go to the middle grades. We have a somewhat superficial way of measuring success in the middle grades. Of course, we look at things we all agreed we need: math, reading, science. Kids need to know those things, but somehow when you know those things and you're through middle grade, you're still not guaranteed. It doesn't even necessarily correlate 100% with success in high school and beyond. How can we expand our thinking about preparedness and skills building in these critical middle school years, maybe making sure that people can understand all the pathways to success that they have access to? We in Colorado, I think many of you, we lose a lot of kids in that 8-9 transition. What do we need to do in those middle years to better hold ourselves accountable to outcomes? Dr. King.
Yeah, so I was a middle school principal, and when I think back to when I was a middle school principal, if I asked my students, if I surveyed them on job opportunities, what future jobs are of interest to you, I could count on doctor, lawyer, NBA player, and hip-hop music artist, for sure. Those 4 were going to be covered. I was much less likely to hear X-ray technician, advanced manufacturing entrepreneur, right? Students just didn't know. I was working in a very low-income community. Students didn't know the range of options available to them. So I think one of the things we really need to do in middle school is career exploration work. When you tell a kid, hey, would you want to work in manufacturing? They have a vision of industry where they're going to be covered in soot at the end of the day, working in what they envision in their mind's eye, a 19th century factory. No, in fact, you could be working in a clean room. And so we've got to get students to see those things as middle schoolers so that they bring those higher aspirations to high school with them.
Yeah, so if we in high school begin with the end in mind, are focused on credentials of value, work-based learning quality experiences, other key, you mentioned FAFSA, other key, middle grade, so it's that backwards
That we need to show
design.
correlate with success, that we need to show those things correlate, yep.
Backwards design that. Let's get very specific about the outcomes in terms of what students have access to in terms of advanced coursework in middle school. One key thing we're looking at, not only algebra, you think about algebra, biology, but also CTE courses. A lot of our educators, parents, students are demanding that to be pushed down so that middle school students have that access. And then through that coursework, not only are they learning and exploring, but you mentioned also, we often say explore in elementary school, engage in middle school, do the shadowing at a business, and experience in high school. So it just, all the outcomes backwards map those into, again, what really matters for your state.
I like that. Explore, engage, achieve. Experience, yeah.
3s.
So let's go to the explore side, early childhood, right? So Colorado is now in our 2nd year of universal free preschool for every family. We're very excited about that. And of course, a number of states also deal with both preschool and childcare as a workforce issue of today, meaning how do we free up more parents to work if they choose, rather than not being able to get ahead because the cost of childcare is most of what they earn. But we also know that a number of studies show the long-term longitudinal benefits of quality early childhood education. What data is missing, and what do we need to do and find out to look at the outcomes for early childhood and the early grades that, again, correlate to success in those years where people engage and ultimately see different careers?
Yeah, so like most states, we're very focused on literacy, science of reading. You pointed out the NAEP data in our country. That should keep all of us up at night, seriously. So science of reading, as an example, with literacy and the foundations, we're making sure not only our K-5 teachers have that, but also our early learning teachers have that support. One thing I'm most excited about in this space is, speaking of outcomes, we're building out a kindergarten readiness indicator, of which we'll start right in the beginning of kindergarten to know where are they coming in. Because I'll never forget, I had a superintendent from Muncie, Indiana say, students are coming in our kindergarten not knowing the difference between a number 2 and the letter M, and 20 miles down the road, they know all their ABCs, they can count to 20, they can work with other kids. So we have to know where students are entering, to then show how to triage more so in that earlier space and add supports.
That's right. And we've all kind of seen this happen in education where once kids are behind, it's harder and harder and they feel more excluded and they're at much higher risk of not succeeding. So the best way is to prevent them from falling behind in the first place in those early years. Dr. King.
I mean, I'd say amen to everything that Katie said. The two things I would add. Yesterday I was at our Polytechnic campus, SUNY Poly, and I was asking students, how'd you get interested in engineering? And so many of the students described experiences with robotics in the K-12 system. And for me, what that means is in that early childhood classroom, I should see blocks, right? I should see students doing the kinds of things that are going to lead to an interest in STEM careers. I should see a water table where students are figuring out what sinks and what floats and asking themselves why, right? So you can seed the future STEM learner by having those experiences in early childhood, and that's part of what quality means. Another part of what quality can mean is, and you and I have talked about this, Governor Polis, dual language learning opportunities. You know, we have this tremendous asset in our country of folks who are speaking a home language other than English. And we underutilize that in the early childhood setting where we could be saying, let's have students learning multiple languages. Let's prepare them to be bilingual or multilingual. And when we think about our European peers, I mean, as President Zelensky's so inspiring, it's also incredibly impressive for him to be able to deliver a speech like that in English. I imagine most of us would struggle to deliver a passionate, powerful speech in another language, right? You can start the seeds of that in early childhood.
You know, and what we do in foreign language in America really doesn't make any sense. I don't know why we waste time with it now, because you have high schoolers who do it for 2 years and don't speak a word of the language. Are they like, I studied French, but I don't speak a word of it. Well, what were you doing? We could have been doing something more meaningful. Obviously, we know the brain science, but also every other. When you want to do it meaningfully, you do it in the early years. It's not that you can't learn a language in high school. You can, and we should do that, but not the way we do it now. And, and if we're serious about having people that are competitive in the global economy, and of course, English and Spanish, but it could be French and Chinese and Japanese and Arabic and all of those languages. That outcome would be one that would come from the early years if we truly want to do that effectively. I know our governors have a lot of thoughts on this, so I want to turn to our governors on this. I think, like many governors, the frustration I have that sort of helped birth this initiative is I see the cool things. They're wonderful. I go to this, we have some P-TECH schools doing concurrent enrollment, apprenticeship programs. We're growing them. It's great. But as a data-driven person, and most of our governors are, I really don't have the evidence to say this is working, and just as importantly, this isn't working, because some things look cool and they don't work, and we want to know that too. Let's go to our governors and see what's on your minds. Governor Youngkin.
Yeah, first of all, thank you. I can't think of a more important initiative to lay the foundation for the future of our nation, and so thank you for leading this. Just two quick thoughts. One is we've got across the country, and I know in Virginia, real-time pressure that needs to be solved now. And that is learning loss coming out of the pandemic, and that's chronic absenteeism. And we saw it in such an extraordinary way in Virginia. And so the immediate need to arrest that issue is so important. We've launched something called All In Virginia, where every school has intensive tutoring between 2 and 5 hours a day, depending on the student's challenges and risk of failure. And it runs in the morning, and it runs in the afternoons, it runs on the weekends, it runs when the schools want to do it. We let each school division decide their route. But we also set aside a statewide task force to tackle chronic absenteeism. One of the things that came out of the pandemic is that all of a sudden families and students were told you don't have to show up to school. You could just do it on your computer, which we know failed. And so we've had to tackle that. And our outcomes will be measured here this fall, because we've just had our first real 9-month run at that during the last school system. And we're going to take what works and do more of it, and take what doesn't work and retool it and do it again. So that's the first step. And then I just want to applaud all the conversation around particularly K through 3rd and K through 5 literacy. We, on a bipartisan basis, passed the Virginia Literacy Act 2 years ago, and are totally focused on the fact that we want every 3rd grader to be able to read As part of that, we are transforming our accreditation process. And we've got to have the wherewithal to say, if you aren't a master of literacy somewhere along the way, you're going to be behind forever. And of course, that leads to all kinds of challenges in life. And so the idea that we're also going to just stop promoting kids along the way who can't do the work and invest in them so that they can is so important. But I just so applaud the science of reading. I so applaud the focus on early education and K through third particularly. And I think as we as governors could stand up and say that every child in every one of our states is going to be able to read in third grade at a proficient level, we would watch the American education system soar.
You know, we have, like most states, the country, achievement decreased during the interruptions in in-person education during COVID. But one of the things that we look at, and you know, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, we said, what about some schools that we found? And we created a Bright Spot Award, and we have a number of schools that increased significantly achievement when they weren't in person during those 2 years. So first of all, something was wrong in the first, these were general, and they've been produced 2 bars in our state accountability system. So what was going on in these schools that we recognized and were learning from that actually led to increased achievement substantially, and in some ways their in-person was somehow interfering with that. I would ask the same thing about absenteeism. How does it correlate to success or failure? Students are smart, kids are smart, humans are smart. What's leading to it? What's going on here? Is it not relevant to them? If they're going there, are they not getting something that helps them? And how do we make it relevant? Probably forcing them to be in a classroom they don't want to be in does not correlate with success. Maybe it does, and we'll force them to be in the classroom. I don't know. But it's probably more than that is the answer. But any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just quickly on chronic absenteeism. So many states across our country, Indiana included, when we talked about attendance, and I'm not gonna get into a math lesson, but follow me real quick. Our numerator would include all of the students and the number of days they attended. The denominator would be all of the students and the number of the days that they could have attended. And so it spits out this false narrative that kids are coming to school because it doesn't look at the individual student and how many students are chronically absent. In Indiana, to your point, and we looked at our learning data and found that there was statistical significance from students who were there at least 94%. So when you look at our dashboard, for every school across the state, it's 90, to be on the percentage point, you have to have been there 94% or more. So we're looking at that individual student to focus again on the learning side of it. Governor, the other thing that is a common topic in education that I'll just mention to you that we haven't really talked a lot about is with the push on work-based learning and apprenticeships in our country. I know Colorado is a major leader in this. A lot of the conversation, and this is something we don't know yet as a country, how do we measure skills at scale? If communication, collaboration, work ethic, critical thinking, if that's so important, then we have to figure out how we might measure it. And I think also we have to really think about who else could be the evaluator.
That's right. I think Spencer Cox talked about optimism. I'm optimistic in this area because, it used to be credential meant high school diploma or a college diploma. Well, what employers are recognizing, and we've moved to skills-based employment. I know other states are in that continuum too. What matters more is what you know, not that you have that letter behind your name. But what kind of meaningful credentialing from others, could be from nonprofits, trade associations, could be from states. How do you demonstrate to employers that people have achieved that competency? And that's kind of that new wave of innovation.
That's right, and you need the data to make sure that that credential that people promise is going to translate into good things actually is. Just quickly, Governor, I really appreciate your leading on tutoring. The evidence is overwhelming on the impact of tutoring and addressing the learning loss. But I also think an underreported benefit of tutoring is the relationship between the student and the tutor, which is one of the reasons that the kid then decides to come to school. And that relationship is such a huge driver of students' sense of purpose and belonging at school. One of the things we're doing in New York, we are just launching an Empire State Service Corps, where we'll have 500 of our SUNY students who will be paid to do public service work. And as part of that, many of the students will do public service work in K-12 schools. And so hanging out with that cool college student will be the reason that the middle schooler decides to come to school on a given day rather than begging their mom to stay home. But the other piece on chronic absenteeism, and Governor Polis, you really captured this, is relevance. And I think for so many kids, especially at the high school level, they come to school and they think, why does this matter to me? What is this all about? What is this all
It's an example.
for?
They're in their second year of French, and they're not going to be able to speak a word of it, and they don't know it, and they don't want to know it.
Totally.
Yes, 100%. And so we have to be very intentional about identifying for every kid, what are they passionate about? What are they excited about? There's a program called Building Assets, Reducing Risk. It was started by a school counselor in Minnesota. It's one of the investing in innovation programs that has scaled over time, has impressive evidence of impact. And one of the things they do is they bring teachers and counselors together to figure out, for every kid, what's Katie excited about? What is she passionate about? What does she care about? And then how do we feed that at school so that she wants to be here? And I think whether it's CTE or an IB program or a dual enrollment class, but every kid needs that thing. That's the hook for them. Maybe for some kids it's sports or arts. I always remember hearing from a middle school principal who said he was really struggling with Friday attendance, and then he moved the arts and dance elective class to Friday, and Friday attendance improved, right? Because kids wanted that. And so we have to all be very intentional about finding the thing that meets kids' passions.
Governors. Yes, Governor Green.
Thank you. I really appreciate hearing from you. What's your feeling about the very best year or 2 years to invest in children's development and education? I know that it's a huge science. What's the best years? Because we all are thinking about it.
It's counter to my interests as a higher ed sector leader, but if you said you only have one additional dollar to invest, I would say the ROI evidence for early childhood is just extraordinary.
And I would make sure you are investing. You have to invest in the early foundation years. Like, again, I'm going to say that K-3, we have to urgently transform our 11th and 12th grade. Students should be out having experiences. The apathy is unbelievable. The chronic absenteeism, if you look at it's an inverted bell curve, friends. They're not coming as much in early childhood, at least in Indiana, but across the nation, high school, we are just so out of date. So I would push you to look early and totally transform that 11th and 12th grade.
Great. And, you know, it's also about more than investment. We all have to balance budgets, unlike the federal government. We all know that. But it's also about policies. And so we can drive policies that matter with existing resources and also move resources from things that don't work to things that work as well. So we don't want to just think in terms of new net investment. I mean, they all use political capital. So even if something's not working, it's not always easy to move the resources over to something that does. It sounds great on paper, but there's a political reality about that too. Governors?
Yeah, I'll just jump in.
Yes.
I'll go with the why person. Birth. That's where we start this conversation, is at birth. Early childhood is absolutely critical. Just as an educator, I implore you to focus this year on really important things. Everybody's an expert in education, and they should be. I'm not saying that in a critical way. But if we want to make a difference, I would encourage the work that is done by the organization and by you is to focus in areas that can make a huge difference. And I would say early childhood is the key.
Yeah, and I think to really understand what the outcomes are that we are driving towards and then work back and figure out what practices, whether it's pedagogy, whether it's professional development, whether it's curriculum structure, what is leading to the outcome of success for the learner.
Can I just give a quick Tony Evers plug? So Governor Evers and I were state superintendents at the same time, and he was a mentor to me then, and it's great to see you, Governor.
We have time for one more governor. Governor Carney.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to
Our vice
this,
chair wants to get a word in too after Governor Carney. Go ahead.
the objective of getting all our students to read proficiently at third grade, and this the reference to the Virginia Literacy Initiative. At one of our earlier sessions, I don't know, a year or so ago, one of the presenters said that the only thing that is proven to be successful in getting students who are behind to be able to read proficiently at third grade is high-dose tutoring. And we all have resources to do that, much coming from the federal government. What's your view on that? It's very expensive. And so because it's one-on-one, obviously, what's your view on the educational theory behind that?
Look, I would say that the tutoring has the best evidence base as a response to students being behind. But if we could, we'd get science of reading right in the first place. And I think, if you're thinking about kind of return on investment and cost-effective interventions, making sure that teachers understand the science of reading, have the skills to help students learn to decode, as well as learn the background knowledge and vocabulary that is foundational to reading success. If we could do that right in the P through 3 ages, we'd be a lot better off.
Yes, and I would ask you to think about your own state and how do you know what kindergartners are behind? Do you know beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year? Because we have the technology and the assessment to be able to give you that information as governors. And then you're just triaging through high dosage tutoring those who need it. And so one thing that I would add to that is, and it hits on your initiative, the outcomes. What are the outcomes beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year for every student in your state? We have 1.12 million, and if Governor Holcomb calls me and says, I want this data, it is my responsibility to hand it to him in a quality manner that I can say, this is it. And I think we don't have that enough in that K-3 space.
Governor Stitt.
Yeah, thanks so much for the conversation. And I want to come back to something that you talked about, like 11th and 12th grade. And in Oklahoma, we're trying to do everything we can to match the education system with our workforce, right? And so we want every kid to be college ready or career ready. And the introduction to them of what's possible and all the great jobs that are out there. And it may be unique in all of our different states. We're a huge aviation and defense state. And so we set up when you're a junior in high school at Norman Public Schools, where I went to high school, an aviation academy. And so now if you want to become an A&P mechanic, you can go there as a junior and you can become an A&P mechanic. And so I'm always trying to get the employers to come back at the high school level and introduce, apprenticeships and internships and just, expose them to so many more jobs. Because like you said, most people feel like that, if I don't go on to college, then I'm a failure, or we've been driving people towards that for so long that I just think we need to kind of re-envision and think about it. So how do we encourage more of the, breaking up the mundane of the education system to think outside the box? I think you look at the countries in Europe, they do a better job of apprenticeships than we do here. And so that's something that I think is on all of our minds, how we can get every kid ready and with the skills that they need for the workforce in our particular communities.
I think our diploma structure is so out of date. I love your point about world language. Right now, Indiana, you can Google and see the headlines. We are in a massive battle to overhaul our diplomas and not just nibble around the edges. You can take this course instead of this course, or this course instead of this course. But truly, what is the foundation aligned to our Indiana GPS characteristics? The target is 9th and 10th grade and blurring into middle school. And then 11th and 12th grade are specifically for credentials of value that are market-driven and work-based learning. Because every child, we need to help provide more seamless pathway, regardless if they want to go employ, enroll, or enlist. But you can imagine some of the headlines are a little aggressive, not always positive in terms of how fast we're pushing, but we can't not push. This is urgent to make high school better for kids.
Dr. King, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would just add incentives and partnership. So incentives for businesses to create internships. One thing we're doing at SUNY is we're committed that we want ultimately all of our undergraduates to have an internship experience. So we've committed resources to that, and so we're providing paid internship experiences for our students. So to the extent you can help make it financially more feasible for students to have those internship, apprenticeship experiences in high school and college, I think that's very valuable. But I'd say partnership as well. For small businesses, it's really hard to take an intern. They don't have the infrastructure that a Bank of America has for having interns. So having someone within the K-12 system whose role is to help mentor those interns, orient them to what it's like to be in a workplace, give advice to the people at the company on how to support the intern, getting teachers out to see the workplace. One of the great things about the P-TECH program, their initial school that IBM was a part of, they worked with the math teachers, so the math curriculum was grounded in the things that were asked of IBM employees. And that's hard to do if you're a teacher who hasn't been exposed to those business environments.
Great. Let's give Dr. Kagan and Dr. Jenner a round of applause. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. Thank you. Really appreciate the conversation. Thank you to both Dr. King and Dr. Jenner, to our governors. This will be an exciting conversation over the next year. Again, our single biggest area of state investment. Let's drive results that matter for our people, for our economy. As we wrap up our final plenary session, I want to thank the NGA. I want to thank Bill McBride, outgoing Chair Cox, for a great presentation. The speakers, the staff who worked so hard to make this event a success. We deeply appreciate everything you do. And with that, I am proud to gavel the 2024 National Governors Association Summer Meeting adjourned.